started, and let's get started with introductions. Okay, so Jim, why don't you start us off?
What's up, everybody? Good morning. Jim Cyril here. Hope everybody is excited. I'm Jim Cyril. I'm the founder of Coverage Inc. And here with my partner, Tanya Klein. And we're going to talk the business of horror screenwriting today and scary good.
All right, who's up next? I'll just go from my screen to the right. Dana, why don't you go?
Hi, everyone. I'm Dana Guerin. I'm a producer of low budget horrors. I've done The Taking of Deborah Logan, Bloodborne with Jerry Klein, who I see on the screen. Hi, honey. And oh my God, 6 others I can't even think of right now. We have an upcoming one next year called 825 Forest Road with the writer-director Steve Cognetti, who did the Hell House LLC trilogy. And, my job is just how to develop scripts and keep them realistic. So hopefully I can give some interesting advice as we go along, but happy to be here.
Awesome.
Thank you. Sal.
Hi, I'm Sal Cardoni, writer, former Coverage Inc. Employee, I guess. My writing partner, who's on here somewhere, Brian, we sold a horror pitch to Paramount years ago, Exorcism at the Vatican, depending on who you ask, is somewhere in development over there. And we have a Blumhouse horror thriller coming out next year and various other things set up around town.
Cool.
Awesome, thank you. Michael, why don't you go next?
Hi, my name is Mike Kuchak. I am the writer-director of a movie called Death Metal, and I'm the writer and producer of another movie called From the Shadows. That one has Keith David and Bruce Davison and Selena Andu starring. Both of those films are coming out, I want to say probably early next year. We have another project that's slated to go into production like mid-23. That one has Mickey Rourke and Lindsay Lohan attached. And I'm also the former senior vice president of development for now defunct Literary Management Development Company. I'm the CEO and founder of Blast Furnace Media and 1/3 of Alt House Productions. So a lot of hats.
Thank you. David.
Hello, I'm David Whitney. I work for a company called Divide and Conquer. We have a deal with Blumhouse where we've done, at this point, about 20 projects, including right now we're overseeing their entire slate of the Amazon Welcome to the Blumhouse. We've just finished one movie that's coming out, I think, first quarter next year, depending on when Amazon decides to release it. And we're about to go into production on our second one in Budapest in a little over a week. So before that, I helped set up the new version of Dark Castle that's now completely independently funded outside of Warner Brothers. We released Seance and the Orphan prequel that came out on Paramount Plus, which you can watch this weekend. And generally, as Anna and Jim will attest to, bug them every week for new genre scripts that come into Coverage Inc. because I love the space.
Awesome.
Great, thank you. William, welcome. How are you?
Hi everyone. So I got recently recruited to this event. My name is William Bill, and I'm a screenwriter and novelist and script consultant. I did a little movie called Return to House on Haunted Hill, which is a Dark Castle production, and I worked with Ethan Irwin on that project. So David, probably that name probably means something to you. And by the way, really enjoyed the new Orphan movie. Very cool twist there. Yeah, so I had a screenwriting career, did a lot of horror, science fiction, action. Then I kind of segued into novels. Still have a script that's going around, being shopped right now, which is more in the sci-fi action space. And I love the genre, and I love reading specs and keeping up with things. Yeah.
Cool.
Awesome, thank you. Did I forget anyone?
Brian.
I think Brian. Oh my God.
Well, I'm Sal's writing partner, so nothing really new to add there. We've been working together, I guess, for about 3 years now. And as Sal said, we sold that pitch to Paramount. We sold a spec to Blumhouse that is in the can and will be on MGM Plus early next year. And then we've got a project with 87 North and with Kennedy Marshall and hopefully Amblin soon.
Awesome. Thank you. All right. I think we have everyone now. Okay, great. Well, welcome everyone. So again, panelists jump in at any time, at any questions, and attendees, please keep yourselves on mute. There will be plenty of time for a Q&A at the end. So let's jump right in. Let's talk about reasons to work in the horror space. Something very basic. Why the horror space?
Anybody, go for it.
You have to just have that passion. I mean, you have to, like any kind of writing, you have to love the genre and then be inspired to come up with ideas in that space, I think. And obviously it's fortunately, it's a commercial genre, not like you're doing something that only, has a niche audience. So.
Yeah, kind of keying off that, one of the main reasons to work in horror is obviously if you love the genre, but also because it's one of the few genres and paradigms in which a spec script can still kind of get not only set up, but also made. There are entire genres in which you almost definitely need an underlying property. Whereas like with horror, if you have a high concept and it's a project that fits a certain budget model, then yeah, a spec you can write a spec and see it actually get made in the real world.
And I think, I find most of the people I work with are the same as I am, where it is in your blood. You either love it or you don't. So, I mean, I think, the passion piece is huge. And the other thing, just as a woman on this panel, I can tell you it is where the best female roles are and the best stories around us. And it's the genre we're allowed to fuck and kill and like be raw. And we don't really get to do that in the rom-coms, and we're nowhere in history. Like I was looking at this report from the Gina Davis Institute about like time women are allowed to be on screen alone, and horror was the only one. We were at 53%. And everything else was below 40, below 30. And history made me really sad at 3%. We get 3% of the face time there. But I think, you really do get to address what's going on, in our lives allegorically, and women get to be whatever they want to be in the genre. And I just love it so much.
I think keying off what Dana, Michael and William had to say, it is one of the few genres that is still remaining on the film side now where original ideas really have a space, right? It's genre and animation are really the two arenas where people are looking for new ideas and not just a remake, a book that's being adapted, a breakfast cereal that's being turned into a movie. And it's a very collaborative space. The people who are passionate about this are working in the industry, are desperately seeking new ideas, and want to help new filmmakers and new writers because they're bringing something new to the table. It's also an arena that allows all of us, everybody on this panel, from the panelists to everyone who's watching and listening to us, ramble on and on, to go to a safe space, whether that be in a theater with people who have a like-minded idea or online, and really grapple with the fears in society right now in a very real and visceral way. And that's important to, the public discourse, has been since the very beginning and remains that way right now.
Awesome. Let's let Ian introduce himself.
Yes.
Hi, everybody. Sorry, I was here earlier, but my microphone wasn't working, and then I needed an update, I guess, for Zoom, so it took a minute, so I apologize. Hello, everyone.
Hi.
Hi.
I like all of you except that guy right there. There's the guy with a red on his shirt there. He's a jerk. Nobody talked to him.
We've had a lot of bad blood, a lot of water under the bridge, man.
Yeah.
Can we mute him out of spite? Because we can do that.
Yes. Hello, everyone. So I'm Ian Holt. Nice to meet everyone.
Ian, why don't you tell us what you do so the attendees know?
I mostly ask people to yell my name at me all day so I don't forget it. Actually, I'm a writer, I'm a producer, and a founding partner with Mike Kuciak and Michael Alden of Old House Productions. Some of you may know me as the writer of Dr. Chopper and episode 50, or as the co-author with Dacre Stoker of the official sequel to Bram Stoker's Dracula. It's a little novel Cooch and I worked on to get out a couple of years ago. And producer of Death Metal with Cooch's directorial debut. And we just finished From the Shadows with two of my heroes, Keith David and Bruce Davison, also Selena Andu, and music by the legendary Alan Howard. So that's what we got going on, and we're moving on to the next couple, right, Cooch?
Yeah, we're getting there, man.
Awesome, awesome. So Ian, why horror? What is a good reason to work in horror?
Well, first off, there are two types of horror, I believe. There's a horror movie and a movie with horror in it.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when you're doing the movie with horror in it, you've got Silence of the Lambs or The Exorcist, or it's a real movie. Horror movies are really not movies. To me, they're amusement park roller coaster theme rides. You know, and the one thing about horror is it gives people a chance to enter business. That's what I really love about it, first off, because it can be done cheaper and it can be done well cheaper. And I believe that ever since we're kids, the one thing horror does for us, every generation, it teaches us to overcome our fears. And as this world evolves and we are more and more giving the trophy to the loser, and kids today don't really understand how tough it is out there until they get there and it hits them in the face. Being in a horror movie theater or on screen in your house, being afraid and overcoming that fear is part of what it's like to live in the real world. I think horror movies are important not only to have fun with and scare us, you know, or a great first date, because by the end of the movie, you're at third base, you know, because you're holding on, you know, scared together. And you don't have to talk much, which we're all used to from the internet. So it's a great first date always. But it also, I think, prepares us for the world, especially the world we live in today.
Wow, scary thoughts. Scary thoughts, but awesome. Thank you. Anyone else want to jump in before we move on to the next question on why good reasons to work in the horror space?
Well, I think the economics of it we have to talk a little bit more about that. We'll probably get more into that as we go along, but you know, like Ian said, it's a great place to get started. You know, the very first movie I ever worked on was an ultra low budget horror movie. And, you know, almost 3 decades later, I'm still working in that space. And, you know, it's accessible, it's doable. It's something that even if you don't have a lot of means, you can probably, if you have some like-minded friends, figure it out and make it happen. And that's just one of the wonderful things about it. You know, there is a lower barrier to entry. You know, and so, some of the greatest filmmakers of our time got their start in horror, and then moved on to other things, and then eventually returned to horror, whatever. You know, it's a great way in. And you know, like Ian said, it's a thrill ride. It's always a thrill ride, so it's always going to be welcome.
All right, cool.
Yeah.
So
I think there's 2 reasons for that lower barrier of entry. The first one is economically speaking, as a business model, horror is perhaps the only genre at which, at any budget level, you can still see not only a theatrical release, but also a successful run. You can make a movie for $100,000 that then makes $100 million. And you just simply don't see that in other genres, except for maybe, ironically enough, faith-driven films sometimes. But that, and the second reason is horror, unlike any other genre, comes with a rabid and hungry and very supportive community. You can find a certain analogy with certain aspects of sci-fi, Trekkies and whatnot. But for the most part, you don't see with other genres. The film festivals dedicated to the genre, conventions, we have a holiday during which it's traditional for people to watch horror movies. And with rom-com, you can kind of say that, yeah, sure, you're going to watch rom-coms on, say, Valentine's Day, but you don't have that full package with every other genre. Horror is unique in that respect.
Yeah, but even St. Valentine's Day has a horror aspect. There's St. Valentine's Day Massacre.
Yeah, I think after Silence of the Lambs got released on Valentine's Day, I don't think I've seen a Valentine's Day without a horror release.
And My Bloody Valentine remade.
Right.
Yeah. All the good stuff. Even though rom-coms are terrifying to me, so it's very personal. Yeah.
Especially the recent ones.
Drafting off what Michael had to say, there's also a dedicated streaming service, right? Like Shudder now exists solely to expand the genre space, introduce people to new filmmakers. They're acquiring, they're making, everything from, the $100,000 low budget movie that Michael was talking about to anthology series like VHS, which the newest edition that came out, I think like a week ago or so, is now the highest viewed Shudder movie of all time. So they've really created a space on the streaming side that is the equivalent to what is happening on the studio side, from the largest of the sort of Blumhouse economies of scale to James Wan and the Conjuring universe that exists over at Warner Brothers. And now it's the most successful, horror franchise of all time, and is essentially replicating the Marvel universe. But to Michael's point, it is a fan base of not only filmmakers, a filmmaking community, a business, model that is propagated both on the industry side, the independent side, and the streaming side, but again, an audience that is constantly looking for something new and wants to find something new. It's really a unique community, in that space, in the sense that your fans also are your marketing tool. We saw this early on in, comic book adaptations, the Marvel Universe famously, you have Jon Favreau in his first Comic-Con appearance creating what Comic-Con has become now. He went around every single panel that was talking about Marvel Comics with his flash drive that had, his first trailer for Iron Man that he cut with a Black Sabbath song that he never got the rights for, and just said, hey, I'm making an Iron Man movie. Here's what it looks like. And lo and behold, 15 years later, Hall H, 3,000 people, in these massive marketing campaigns for movies. That all came from his, growing up and working in the genre space and understanding low budget genre filmmaking and how to apply that to comic book movies.
Yeah, there is such a thing as a lower budgeted, say, sci-fi project or comedy that finds its audience, does well. But you don't see a consistency with any other genre outside of horror in such a way that it can build a business model around it, where, like, say, Blumhouse can say, we're going to make X number of movies per year for $5 million or under. And if one of them makes $100 million, then great, awesome. And that pays for, X, Y, Z. And on top of that, because horror also travels well, comedy struggles to travel, drama struggles to travel, thriller can travel, action can travel, but action, sci-fi, thrillers usually are all more expensive movies. It is, horror is the one genre in which you can be Jane Bag of Donuts, who's never written anything. You can write a screenplay, your first screenplay ever, get it optioned, get it made, get it released, and that movie can make $100 million theatrical.
And it's also like the Law and Order of movies, because you could turn on Law and Order any day, not have seen one episode of course, 8 years it's been on, or 22 years, and enjoy the episode. The same thing with horror. I mean, when you watch, a movie, if you don't know, let's say even a Rambo movie, you still have to know about the Vietnam War and what happened to, to really understand what's going on in the movie. Even though it's a stupid movie, you still got to know certain things. Horror, all you got to know is these girls are hot, these guys want to sleep with them, and this guy wants to kill them. I'm in, it's that simple. I mean, when I did my first horror movie, this woman had done 45 horror movies who produced it, and she says, all right, I'm hiring you to write the script, and I'm going to trust you, but you have to give me the basics of horror. And I said, what is that? And she said, I need at least 5 deaths, no one over 21, 2 sex scenes, one of them lesbians, and medium gore.
Oh my goodness.
That was it. She said, if you can do that, I will keep hiring you.
Awesome. Thank you. And let's hang on 1 second. Let's say hi to Jake, who has joined us. Jake Wagner, welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Hi, Jake.
How are you? Hi, everybody. Good to see y'all.
Hey, introduce yourself, Jake.
I'm Jake Wagner. I'm a manager and a producer, and I own my own company called Alibi, and horror is my favorite genre. So I didn't want to miss out on the Zoom on Halloween weekend.
Awesome. Thank you. Well, then here we have a question for the panel then. And especially since we have Jake here now, horror as a spec, because I'm sure many of our attendees are here because they have one or several spec scripts. So since they have one or several spec scripts, what should be their next steps?
As far as they've got a horror script ready to go, a spec script?
I'm assuming, yes.
I would enter it in, contests like there's a handful of good ones out there, from Austin to Blue Cat to Script Pipeline to Nichols to Page to Final Draft. And just see how high it places in a contest, and then I would start querying representatives, agents, and managers. Just do a short and sweet query and just see if the log line gets some interest, get some play. See, and then horror's so hot right now, and I'm sure you guys have covered some of this already because I'm a little late to Zoom, but like Smile, Barbarian, and everyone's clamoring for horror, and the budget doesn't matter. So I mean, everyone will glance at a log line, and if it's good, someone will give it a read. So I would just start getting it out there if you feel confident you have something really good.
Tanya, my piece of advice would be that make sure it's at least 140 pages long. This is actually something that Brian and I did. The first draft of the script, our first script that we ever wrote together was 138. I knew better, of course. It was an internal document. The draft that went to Paramount and came this close to selling, but didn't. But then we sold the next one to them 2 months later. That was 94 pages. And we didn't lose anything. We kept the soul of it, So we cut 40 whatever fucking pages in 2 months. Anyway, but that's a thing, is that no one's going to read your horror script if it's over 100 pages. It should be a 95 on the dot.
I see things completely different. I think sending your script out and going to festivals when you're doing horror is a waste of freaking time. I think you should write a script that you can make. And if you're not a filmmaker, then go to the film schools and find a filmmaker, put up flyers, go out and make it yourself and sell it. Find a way to do it. Because that's the one thing that horror allows you to do. And that's why I left Hollywood, was because I don't need to wait for anyone. I've had scripts in development for years. I've had on Friday, Joe Dante was making my movies, going into pre-production on my movie on Monday, but Friday, Looney Tunes Back in Action opened. It was the biggest bomb in history. And his deal was canceled at Warner Brothers, and so was my movie. I had the 2008 crash. I was part of a slate of films. You know, all this stuff always happens. But the one thing you can do in horror, because you don't need that huge budget if you're smart. And that's the thing. That's one thing that Cooch and I have always really worked hard to figure out. Like, I met a guy who knew a guy who was looking for a band to go out on tour with. He needed a band. I said I knew a band. We started talking. It turns out he had a recording studio, a farm, and a tour bus. I said, if you do the score, would you let me get your locations to film a movie? He said yes. I called Cooch. Next thing I know, we put a story together, Death Metal, and we were in Ohio shooting it.
Right. I kind of building on that idea. Right now in human history, we've never been at a place at which the means of production are so available. If you have a smartphone in your pocket that can shoot video, you can now make a movie. And so there is value to going the traditional route of hustling a screenplay around, but we're at a place where that's no longer the only option for a screenwriter to get their work in front of people. You can shoot, what's called a proof of concept, where you shoot a short film version of your idea. And I will say that, especially right now, as the industry as it stands, it's a lot easier to get someone to look at a 3-minute fun thing on YouTube than it is to get them to sit down for like an hour with a spec screenplay. Yeah, in that 3 minutes, if you get it, you get it. And the perfect example being Lights Out, or even Mama. Both of those started as short films and acted as effective proof of concepts, and both of those films were successful too. So anyway, just throwing it out there.
Yeah, this is something that really happened to Cooch and I. My manager sent me out to Searchlight to pitch the Dracula story before it was a novel, when it was a screenplay, before the Stoker family signed on to it. And while I was there, I went to the bathroom and I met Jan de Bont. And we had a laugh because we went to shake hands. We go, maybe we should wash our hands first. And we both laughed. And he gave me his card for Blue Tulip and said, when you got something, call me. I went back to Cooch, who was my manager, and I said, why don't we send him Undead? They were already working with him on another project. And he said, well, you haven't produced anything. So you're not professional. I can't read it yet. When you produce something, come back to me. So Cooch and I went out and I wound up getting Dr. Chopper. He called Jan de Bont back and said, hey, he just got the premiere night on Stars. Did so well, the movie. And Jan said, all right, send me a script. And that's how I got a development deal and a whole thing at Blue Tulip. He was going to executive produce the film. So by doing your own movie, you are now a filmmaker. You have a credit on IMDb. People are more apt to read your other stuff if you've actually done something.
What I would add,
Drafting off what Michael and Ian on one side. Sorry to cut you off, Tanya. What
go
Michael
ahead.
and Ian said on one side and what Jake said on the other. The great thing is you can do both at exactly the same time, right? As long as you control your material, you can submit to film festivals. That's giving you, free reads from, people who are in the industry who look at thousands of scripts and can judge whether your material rises to the top of the heap, right? At the same time, you can approach an indie filmmaking direction because, again, the great thing about horror is that this is a genre and a model that is, well suited for these kinds of movies, and people are down to sort of roll up their sleeves because they understand not only the inherent value, how it's going to help them as filmmakers. We can talk ad nauseum about short film directors that transition to, larger budget movies. Jake represents Lars Klevberg, for example, who, has successfully been able to do that. It's really just about getting your material in as many hands as possible because you never know which direction it's going to go. Just because you make a movie independently, guess what? You're still going to have to find distribution for it. And,
Right.
I'm going to take Shudder as a perfect example. They'll look at material now at any stage of the process, right? They'll look at scripts to put together. Again, barrier to entry there is going to be a little bit higher because you're going to have to work with them with their budget. And it's really all about control. How much control do you want to give up at every step of the process? If you go, Michael and Ian's route, you have a finished film, then, you're looking at all of these places for distribution. Guess what? Shudder, Blumhouse, any studio, they have a slate that they're trying to put together. They need slots. So again, and you can go in any direction you want. It's really about getting your material in as many hands as possible because you don't know what's going to happen to it. Ian was talking about, meeting all these amazing people and putting things together independently. Jake, the same thing. You go the festival, the screenplay competition or festival route, you never know where that material is going to go, right? Somebody could read something at one festival and happens to work, somewhere else. Everyone on this panel, not even knowing all of them, I know that we're all wearing multiple hats because that's what you do when you're in the genre space, right? You're working on the studio side, you're working on the independent side at exactly the same time. So really, it's just getting your material in as many hands as humanly possible.
Although getting good reviews and a good read on a script for horror is sometimes the kiss of death. Because I mean, if you get great reviews in a horror movie, then probably the audience won't like it.
It might be like an elevated horror or A24, which has its market. But what I was going to add to the conversation is that I think it really boils down to how strong the high concept is of the script. I think if you really tap into something unique, I would always try to hit the studio contest or try to get a manager because the strength of that pitch might get them to look at it. If it's a horror movie that's just effective, scary, and it's going to work, I mean, look at something like Terrifier. Maybe on a pitch level, you'd be like, well, it's a scary clown. It's channeling 80s, slasher films. Maybe at that point you might be like, well, that might be a hard sell for a studio. And then maybe finding an independent route is the way to go. So it's kind of like evaluating your own work in a way and seeing where it fits in, and again, like what I'm getting from my manager right now is that horror is, there's certain people that are buying it and certain studios that are not buying it unless you can hit that Conjuring sweet spot, right? So you got to kind of like evaluate where the script is at, and it could be a great script that's really an A24. It's not a studio movie, so you have to find a different route. But if you go into something that's like really high concept, then at least try the spec route. Try to the manager route.
Well, there's a whole plethora of industry that is out there that is waiting for a really exciting spec in the genre, as I'm sure Jake and many of the panel can attest to.
Well, Jim, hang on one second. Also keying off of that, I think we need to cover what's currently hot and what's not when it comes to horror.
Okay, yeah, great.
Before we go any deeper into that, let's cover the basics. Like right now, at any given time, we've got, we want slashers, we don't want slashers, we want creatures, we don't want creatures, we want this or that. So currently, what should our attendees focus on when they write their spec scripts, and what should they absolutely not write?
Whatever's happening in theaters, don't write.
Yep.
Sorry about that. Whatever's in the theaters right now, forget it. Because by the time you write it and get it out, there's already 10 people that already sold movies like it, and it'll be onto something else by the time you even get a chance to show your script. You got to think 10 steps ahead. It's like playing chess. If everyone's doing zombie movies, well, what haven't they done yet? Oh, the killer car movie. Let's do a killer car movie because nobody's done a killer car movie for 30 years and no one's even thinking of it. You got to think about what's the next thing. That's why the spec script route is so hard, because you have to, out of all the filmmakers that are out there, 2 or 3 are going to get picked as a spec script. Everything else is going to be derivative of something else, or it's all subjective also to who you get to read it. I mean, someone remember the end of the Sixth Sense was not the end that we saw in theaters. That was not in the script. That was a producer, after he bought the script, tacked that on and made history. But sometimes lightning strikes. Now everyone wants a twist ending, and sometimes the twist ending isn't there. you know, and by the time you write your twist ending and figure it out, oh, the twist ending's out of style because everyone's expecting the twist at the end. So you can drive yourself crazy trying to figure out what's next or what's hot. I think the only thing to do is to see what hasn't been done in a while. Everything is circular and it comes back.
To build off of that, yes, everything comes back, and yeah, once it's out in the theater, they've got 10 more following and you're done. For me, what really resonates is something that is reflective of the time we're living. So, you know, post-pandemic, I mean, what you're seeing more and more are, you know, not home invasions, but like single location, everyone in one house, even if it's span of 30 years, like, because that's what we've just been through. And that's it, you know, horror movies can be therapeutic, and we sort of look to them to work out our current anxieties. So for me, if you're trying to develop something original and something that resonates, I mean, look no further than the freaking newspaper and, you know, figure out what is like an allegorical way you can retell this story. And that usually hits the nerve.
To Dana and Ian's point, it's really two things: scary and scalable, right? Is whatever you're writing, is whatever you're passionate about, is it scary to you? Because guess what? If it's scary to you, it's going to be scary to somebody else. And the second point, scalable. Can this movie, you know, be made at a studio level, right? Does it have a high enough concept? Is there something that a studio marketing department is going to get really excited about? Or at the same time, is it something that you could go take to the independent market, you know, raise 100K on, you know, GoFundMe and make it yourself, or take it to a foreign sales company and they're going to get excited about it? Look at something like The Purge, right? Here's an idea that you can apply across the spectrum to movie after movie, TV show episode after TV show episode. You can make it for $1 million, you can make it for $10 million, but you understand what the idea is and why it is scary. So again, if it's scary to you, it's going to be scary to me, it's going to be scary to Dana, it's going to be scary to Michael. Jake is going to make a lot of money selling it, and there you go.
I totally agree.
On an idea level too, just as far as like what people are looking for and what should they write and what shouldn't they write, I think for me it's more about like just what haven't we seen before, which is tricky because you could say we've seen it all in horror, but it's like, so what's the clever twist on taking something we have seen before that's worked and kind of like, you know, updating it and contemporarizing it for today, like someone was mentioned, like whether it's a rip from the headlines or just some kind of scare today. But it's like, listen, zombies, vampires, they'll always be around. It's just like, what can you do with them that's new, that we haven't seen? What can you bring new to the table? That's what I personally look for. If it's a home invasion movie, great. How is it like The Purge took the home invasion movie and was like, well, there's a day of the year that there's no rules, so anyone can just kill anyone. That's the high concept. I think someone mentioned high concepts get traction, but at its base, it is a home invasion horror thriller with a super high concept hook, easy to understand, and we've just had never seen that before. And that's personally what I look for, is like, what are we bringing new to the table?
Can I add one thing here? In the last year, the catchphrase that we've heard from executives the most, Brian and I, is subversive. It's got to be subversive. So, and we bust each other's balls that, well, subversive is going to be out, now it's got to be reversive, then it's got to be cursive, because these things are fads and they move around. But subversive, and that can be defined in a billion ways. It's basically what you think you're going to expect, you give them the 180 of that. And these executives talk about it all the time. It's everywhere, in emails, in Zoom calls, on phone calls, subversive, whatever that means.
I'm not sure where everybody's at in their career on this call. And I'm very skeptical to make blanket statements about what you should and shouldn't do. But what Sal and I did that gave us success and then got us in the guild and got us paid work and allowed us to sell a spec is that we just wrote what we wanted to. That was our first horror spec. We didn't worry if it was this or it was that. And then that got people's attention. They saw that we could write. They saw what our concerns were. They saw our voice as writers. Now that script didn't get made, maybe it does down the road. But oftentimes, I think this happens to people that just want to be writers. You need a calling card script that's just going to get everybody's attention. And from that, you'll start to get more work and you'll start to meet people. Again, I don't know if that's where people are in their careers on this call. They're just trying to get someone to read their work. But that's what Sal and I did that got us repped and then got us in the guild.
Oh, that's a good point, because what got me started was I went and said I realized everyone was trying to write a great script and have that, like Brian said, that calling card script. But so agents, when you call them, managers, they expect that, everyone, and it's hard because everyone's gonna think that their script is great because they worked on it so hard. So it's the greatest thing ever. And then when someone reads it, goes, eh. But if it's not yours, and what I mean by that is I took a different route. I said, let me go find a novel, an old novel that was a bestseller that hadn't been made into a movie that I liked and I thought I could translate into a film. So I found a bestseller from 1973, tracked down the author, made a deal with him to split the money we make and give him all the money for the rights sale and split some money off from the screenplay. He gave me the rights for $1. Now I had a branded product that's proven hit, even though it was from like years ago. I had a proven hit novel, and all of a sudden every manager wanted to read it. I was going in for meetings, and that's how I got my first manager. So sometimes, it's not using your own idea, but using someone else and say, hey, it's a hit. It's already a hit. I don't have to think that mine's a hit, because no one knows. One guy could write a script and everybody freaking hates it, and then it's made and the whole world loves it. No one knows what's a hit until it's a hit. I mean, if you would have said that Friday the 13th would have been a hit, there's no story, there's no nothing. It's just a bunch of people getting killed. If you would have said that was going to be a hit, I mean, even look at Texas Chainsaw Massacre. There's a story there. Town died. There's hippies and right wingers and the Vietnam War and all that stuff is in that movie. Friday the 13th, it's just someone running around killing people. There's no characters. There's no nothing. Yet it was one of the biggest hits ever. How do you know that? I mean, look at It Followed. There's no story. It just follows you around. Right? So how do you know what's a hit and what's not? No one does. So,
I gotta jump in real quick. Whoever is typing, anyone who's typing, please mute yourself. Okay, it's super loud. It's blowing out everything. Okay, so mute it. Thank you very much.
Okay, actually, another question: should the writers on this call, when they're writing their script, should they keep budget in mind?
It depends on the idea, on the power of the idea. Yeah, I mean, if you're writing something that's, I mean, look at like what's come before, like if you're doing like a slasher, it needs to hit a certain budget. You can't do a $200 million slasher. And that the same holds true, if you're doing like, let's say, like a horror that's trying to do World War Z or whatever, then yeah, you can scale it up. I mean, it's really a question of what the power of the idea is and how does it fit with what's come before.
I mean, I do think as a first-time writer, you really need to show that you can scale it down, and there are clever ways to do it. And I mean, I love getting handed scripts by writers who are like, it's low budget. I'm like, you blew up the moon. Like,
Yeah.
Yeah, guys. But there are certain, I love pointing out to people like where you can scale it down without changing story, character. I mean, even just freaking a location. You can have the same conversation, standing in a kitchen for no money, but you put them driving in a car having that same conversation, and it's fire marshal and stunts and different kind of cameras and different kind of insurance. I'm like, so there are really simple ways to scale it down, but as first-time writers, I do think you need to be conscious of ways where you can be creative and cost-cutting and still really get to the heart and soul of everything.
Yeah, like Bill said, I think the easiest, screenwriters don't also have to be line producers, but on the other hand, you should look at, you should do what's called running your comparables, which is to look at 5, 10, maybe even 20 projects that are somewhat like yours. Like if you're going to write a ghost story, or look at 20 other ghost stories and see, are we blowing up buildings? Are there car chases? You should look at the star power, the level of gore, XYZ. Like for instance, within the independent realm, there is a laser specific paradigm that calls for two name stars and a $1.2 million budget and a super contained location. And if you can check all of those boxes, then there's a lot of financing sources within the independent space that just kind of get that and go, yeah, we can make that movie because we know how we're going to make money doing that. Now, on the flip side, and even at the studio level, let's say the Blumhouses and whatnot, where we're aiming for that kind of $5 million and under, sweet spot. That being said, you look at, say, Barbarian, which was 10 million, I want to say, and that's not factoring in P&A. And we have a Neighborhood, we have Creature Effects, XYZ. On the one hand, I hesitate to advise against putting limitations on your own imagination. On the other hand, a script isn't like a novel. In a novel, it's just ink on the page. In a screenplay, the words that you put on the page then have to be translated to the screen. And everything that you write down costs money at some level. So again, if you're going to make a slasher movie and it's not, say, part of the Halloween franchise, then you want to keep it within a very, very specific budget level. Ghost stories the same way, exorcism movies the same way, XYZ. So, I once had a guy send me his zombie script, and he was like, you can only take on the zombie script if you agree that at the end, when 1,000 zombies appear, that they're all actors in makeup, it's not CGI. And it was like, no. No, I'm not. No.
So yeah, it's a question of degree, I would say. I mean, I just talking about one of my specs. I mean, I had a spec where the ghost was using heat and fire as a way of, like killing people. So my creative decision was to set it during winter, and there was snow. So you would have like snow melting and all that stuff. And again, they looked at it and they're like, well, no, we're going to shoot this in New Mexico. We cannot have snow. We cannot have this be in the winter. This is going to add so much money to it. Let's just rewrite it. It's an easy fix, but it still felt small, or at least at the budget level that the movie kind of needed to be in, within a ballpark. So I think it's like, yeah, you can't get so micro about it where you're like, should it be in a car? Should it be in in an elevator? that kind of thing. But I think at the same time, it's about the scale of it. Like if it is a certain genre movie, try not to like make it like a $200 million movie, but don't obsess about like, is it 100,000 or 5 million? Because that can be easily done in a rewrite. I mean, it can easily.
I think when you have a writer and you're reading a script, or anyone that you're reading a script, you can tell their level of experience by how that script is. And there are little things like, if there's a sign above you and the character reads the sign, he's never actually had a movie made, because if the character's looking up at the sign, the camera's on the sign, the audience can read it for themselves. Why is the character saying what the audience is seeing with their eyes? So there's just the same thing with budget. If you're trying to do a low budget movie and you're telling me you can make this movie for $100,000, and you have this big car scene with 5 people in the car and they're all talking, I know that's a week of shooting, because I got to shoot each character and then reverse. I got to shoot the wide shot. I got to shoot the car. If the guy does the same scene and it's a car going down the road and it's all in voiceover, I know he knows what he's talking about as far as budget.
I think to William, Michael, Dana, and Ian's point, the thing really to take away from this is do your research. That's the fun part about working in the genre. Anyone you're going to send your script to, whether it be financiers, managers, studios, contests, the people on the other receiving end, chances are they know what's in the marketplace as well. You know, Michael was saying, you know, if you're going to do a slasher movie, understand the slashers that came before. What are the movies that made money? What are the movies that, you know, pushed the conversation forward? Sometimes they're not the same, right? There are, because the genre space is so encompassing on the film side, there are tiny little independent movies like It Follows, right? That push the conversation forward. It didn't make $300 million like The Conjuring did, but it still informed the filmmakers that are working in the space now. So know generally the subgenre that you're working in. What's the last best movie? Where has that left the conversation for genre audiences and for studios? And then what was the last movie that made a lot of money? Again, they may not be the same things, but what intrinsically is the DNA in that you can see yourself, because again, you're a fan just like the rest of us, that is really, you know, leaving this subgenre in its space. You know, earlier Jake brought up, you know, both Barbarian and Smile. Sal was talking about Subversive. All these movies right now that are working are unexpected, right? You see the hook of Barbarian, and it's two people who find themselves at the same Airbnb. That's the setup, and then it goes to a completely wild place. Smile, we've seen the Curse movie before, but it's both talking about something that is, you know, incredibly terrifying and real right now in the sort of mental health apparatus, and it's using that curse, you know, mythology and subgenre to tell something new that expands upon an existing subgenre that everybody likes. It's also based on a short film. So it really, you know, not only was a fantastic calling card for this filmmaker, and it's one direction and one path that you can go, you know, in the genre space, but, you know, watch, if no one on here has seen the short film, please go track it down. It's awesome, and it's a great calling card for what that director was able to do. You know, that is a direction you can go as well. You know, if you have a great, you know, cold open or one scene, and, you know, this is the thing that people are telling you, either in the festival route, as, you know, Jake pointed out, the independent route that Ian was talking about, if this, you know, the idea and script that you're sending to people, if they're keying in on this one moment, go find an interesting filmmaker, get out there, turn it into a short. Shorts getting turned into movies happens all the time. Jake can speak to that. He's done it a couple of times. There are, again, multiple avenues to go in, but really just have fun. Go watch a bunch of movies. What do you like? What's scary to you? And most importantly, you know, where is the subgenre that you are in? Where is it right now? And where do you think it's going next? And where do you want to go next with it?
And also, and I'm boring this way, but you also really do need to get familiar with structure, even though everyone's got their creative ideas and the way to attack it. I can't tell you how many times I've been in development with a writer who's like, no, I'm not going to do a structure. I'm going to be like Cabin in the Woods. That's the one they always bring out. And I was like, dude, watch Cabin in the Woods again. I'm like, I can tell you the page number that each structure starts. Like it's original. It is cool, but I'm just like, it didn't reinvent the wheel when it came to how to watch a movie and how, you know, you've got your inciting incident and introduction to the character and, you know,
send him the link to
the
just send him the link to
structure
Sid.
is alive and well. Sorry, what? I'm so sorry.
Just send him the link to Sid Field.
Yeah, I have a pet theory in terms of structuring horror stories, and my pet theory is this: that horror stories generally have 3 acts, and the first act is the characters are being haunted, but they don't know that they're being haunted yet. That they know that they're being haunted, but they don't know what to do about it. And the third act is they're being haunted, they know who it is, what to do about it, and they're trying to do something about it. And that's obviously that doesn't apply to every single story. Barbarian is a really good example, but generally speaking, it's like Act 1, they show up at the house, they go to the camp, XYZ. They don't know they're being haunted, but there's some little things going on. Act 2, they know that they're being haunted. They're running around, they're getting killed, XYZ. Act 3, they know they're being haunted. They've spoken to Professor Exposition. They're trying to do the thing to make the haunting go away, and they do it.
That was a great article, Mike. I read that this week, and
Yes.
I mean, I think it just mirrors overall structure, but it just drills down.
Yeah, yeah.
I think that's a good thing to keep in the back of your mind. And I think
And
that applies to Barbarian.
I'm begging everyone to not have your characters just be reactive the entire time. I'm like, I look for characters that are proactive, that figure out their shit, that come up with a plan, whether it fails, whether they win, like, doesn't even matter where it goes. But, you know, stop having these characters that just things happen to them the whole time. It is painful to read, and it will be a count against you. Like, really activate your characters and it'll activate the story.
Yeah, even in Act 1, when the characters are still, you're still putting your pieces on the chessboard, your protagonist, she should still be like noticing things like, hey, that's kind of yeah, even if she's not doing anything, we're giving her the action of noticing, of being perceptive. And that's how we kind of carve her out as our protagonist. And also at the same time, you know, one of the earlier questions was, you know, what should writers be writing? And ultimately, it still, whether it's horror or not, it still comes down to character and story. And so if you have a story in which characters want to do something, they have a goal and a motivation. Another of my pet theories is, you know, generally speaking, the better horror films are those in which you can remove whatever haunting element that you have and you still have a story to tell. And by, you know, my go-to example is always The Shining. If the Overlook Hotel was not haunted, you would still have a story to tell about these three characters in that situation, XYZ. Obviously, that's not a 100% applicable situation, but even in Friday the 13th, if Jason Voorhees never showed up, you would still have a teen comedy. You know, you should have that foundation of characters. We can identify with them. They're human beings. They're well developed. They want something. They're trying to make something happen. And even if the house isn't haunted, if no killer shows up, we should still have something to watch. And then you know, that's the far better basis of what should you be writing than like, hey, zombies are hot right now, bang out a zombie spec. It's like, that's ludicrous.
Right. It's Titanic and Pearl Harbor, right? If Pearl Harbor didn't happen in Pearl Harbor, I couldn't have stood another minute watching those two characters fall in and out of love. If the iceberg never hit the Titanic, I could have watched the whole movie about Jack and Rose and not minded at all. It would have been a great love story. So
awesome. So keying off of that, thank you for everyone who brought up structure and active protagonists. I mean, we talk about that a lot at Coverage Inc. Yes. So what are the common mistakes that horror writers make?
first is not having a theme. Even if it's a silly theme like crime doesn't pay, or good things happen to good people, whatever it is, the first thing you start with is who I'm telling this story for and what am I trying to say with it before you do anything else. Because if you take that away, you've got just a bunch of people dying. You got to say something with it. Whether, you may not realize it, but It Follows is talking about venereal disease. Even though George Romero said that Night of the Living Dead was not about the civil rights movement, the Vietnam War, if you watch it, it's about the civil rights movement and the Vietnam War. If you're watching Texas Chainsaw Massacre, it's about the economic problems of the 70s and the right-wing pro-Vietnam War people in the South, the conservatives, versus getting a bunch of dumb liberals to come down there and kicking liberals' ass. It's the same thing we see on, the news every night today, as we come to the election. But that's what these movies all have that in there, the great ones. So first thing to do is, why are you making this story? Why are you telling it? What are you trying to say to your audience, and know who your audience is? Are you making this audience for girls, for boys, adult audiences, children? You know, is the villain, is the killer a guy that hates kids in the school? You know, I mean, I don't know, whatever it is. Why? You always ask yourself as a writer, as I'm writing, if this guy's killing kids, why is he killing them? Oh, because their parents killed him. I've got Freddy Krueger. Now I understand. You know, and what am I saying about dreams and all this stuff? I mean, if you look at Friday the 13th in these movies, it's always the picked on kid, the nice girl, you know, the unpopular kid in the school survives, right? And the killer kills all the popular kids. So for every kid that ever got picked on in school, every horror movie is cathartic for them. Like, oh yeah, the captain of the football team gets their head chopped off. Yeah, I wish that would happen in my school. Even though it's horrible to say, that's what's really going on.
Can I add something here? As far as what we're talking about, and I think someone else already stated it, it's story. You know, Jake said something important. What haven't we seen before? I'm sure you guys all have cable and watch 24/7 haunting series on and on and on, that you see whatever horror has been done is being done, and you go, what can I do that's different than that? People are watching it like crazy. And what's different is story. Forget about chopping off heads, blood, you know, zombies going crazy. It's the story that's going to be different, that's going to capture someone's attention. And I think as writers, that's what we all struggle about. Can I ask a question? I'm not sure. As far as budget, you know, some of you have treated this like this is our first time out as filmmakers. So, you know, we got to look at doing a cheapo horror flick as an entryway. But let's say you've been writing scripts like I have, like action adventures, different formats, and I want to create a horror that's somewhat sophisticated but commercial, but it entails, you know, maybe a foreign location. Does that sit well with the funding of something like that? Maybe they could answer that.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not a producer, but I go by what sells and specs that sell and things I've read. I think it's all, again, based on the strength of the idea, obviously coupled with the execution of the idea. So, you know, if it's an idea that entails scale, and if the movie warrants that scale, then go for it. You know, I mean, you kind of have to look at it a little bit from that perspective, you know. And then going back to what Ian was saying about theme, I read a really good article that on Script Shadow this week. It was a review of Barbarian, and he kind of broke it down as the first act is classic horror, and then the second act becomes social horror, which is really hot right now. I mean, ever since Get Out, you can tap into something very topical or current or in the zeitgeist. You know, you can kind of really, you know, channel all that stuff. But what he did point out was, you know, the first act is kind of separate from that. It's really just a suspenseful situation and you're pushing it. So I think in terms of theme, you can have these sort of like happening right now and you find that angle, but you also have like just universal themes that are timeless, not specific to any point in time, which is survival, you know, vengeance, being wronged, you know, all those things are things that are going to be always relevant no matter what. And then other things are just like of the moment. So I just something throwing that out there. Yeah.
Specifically answering the question
Can I
regarding.
interrupt here, Tanya?
Okay.
Sorry. Brian and I have a deadline next week, so we got to bounce. I hate to leave in the middle of at the end of the first act here.
But thank you so much for coming. Yes.
Sorry. Yeah, we just the timing, you know.
I think to answer Bruno's question, thank you so
All right,
much.
bye, guys.
Bye.
Thanks, guys.
All right, man.
Answer
Yep, bye.
Bruno's question just directly. I think understand then if you again if you have a horror genre script or idea that is set in a foreign country, just do the research, right? Find the find the movies that have been made in foreign countries. Barbarian was filmed in Serbia, for example, right? And look at how those movies came together. If you're having trouble, finding this information, again, the horror community is always sort of down to be helpful. So just ask questions like, what are the models that look to foreign countries? Studios make movies, in whatever place they're going to get the biggest, tax write-off. So sometimes that can be domestically. Again, Hereditary was made in Utah. They have a great fund. A lot of things happen overseas as well. Their entire, foreign sales companies or, distribution companies. Jake can talk a lot about Studio Canal. He's got a movie with them, XYZ, that sort of specifically look for material that can be set in, either European or Asian or Canadian locales, because those governments are, let's just say, more helpful in the film funds that they provide, and are more supportive of localized filmmakers. I think in a bigger sense, drafting off what William was saying, the best genre movies, at least in my mind, and I think if you look at what studios are looking for, are both timely and timeless, right? They have universal themes that are always relevant, but then pick something specific to right now. William brought up Get Out. I think that's a perfect example, right? The universalness of it is every one of us at some point is going to fall in love with somebody and have to meet their family. That is timely, that is universal, that's going to be around now. It has been, it will be in the future. The timeliness was Jordan Peele's personal own lived experience as a Black man stepping into suburban white America. So the movie kind of hits, in these two spaces, and that's what makes it sort of singular and stand out. This has been happening in, every sort of era of horror. We can go back to the 70s, as, Ian was talking about, with what Romero was doing with his zombie movies. You can see it in the 80s with, John Carpenter and The Thing. That movie, again, works on multiple levels, like a great Simpsons episode. You can go in and just get your creature feature horror movie, and that's your fix, and awesome, that's great. If you understand the sort of politics and the world as it was in the 80s, it's really an allegory for the AIDS epidemic. If you get that, that's awesome and that's great, and you have this other level to it, but you can still, again, enjoy the universal timelessness of a creature genre movie, and it sort of works at either of those levels. So I think it's important to understand, the marketplace, where you think your idea, your film sits, and what is it saying in the current moment. Because again, if it's scary to you, it's going to be scary to Jim, it's going to be scary to Tanya, it's going to be scary to all of us.
One of the great lessons I learned was sometimes it's just about the point of view that you're taking in the script, or and that sometimes comes with the director. I had a script that Ernest Dickerson was brought onto. It was a vampire script. And though it didn't get made because his last movie didn't do that hot, and he was in between what was going to go on with his career, because was he a cinematographer or is he a director, blah blah blah. But he looked at the vampire script. He goes, my angle on this is that these people hate the vampires, and they haven't done anything yet, and that reminds me of racism and prejudice. And I want to take this rewrite in this way, so we get that feeling of racism and prejudice toward the vampires. And even though the vampires get to choose if they want to be good and evil in my script, and he said, that's what we're going to do. And I was like, it was like this light bulb went off, that as a point of view on a vampire film, that had never been done. And to this day, I mean, we walked around Manhattan all night talking about it, and it didn't get made. To this day, I still regret it, because that's a movie I'd like to see, but so sometimes just coming at something from a point of view other than your own, or a point of view that hasn't been done, as in Get Out, can really change the value of a script, even if it's, just vampires again.
Circling back around to the original question of what mistakes that you see scripts make. And I think specifically, I've read a lot of horror screenplays that are not scary, and they don't seem to even be trying to be scary. I think that horror is scares to horror or like laughs to a comedy. It is exactly as successful of a screenplay and thus as a movie as much as you deliver on the goods of the genre. That is why the audience is paid money for a ticket to see the movie is to be scared. And I think that if you lean into the goal of scaring the audience, then everything else is icing on the cake. Again, using comedy as an analogy, there are a lot of comedies out there where it's like the story is just kind of there to give the character something to do. So long as it's funny and we're laughing, then it's a successful film. So if we're looking at the script and being like, do we open with a scary scene? Are we trying to establish dread? Are we trying to create a sense of dread? Are we looking for places where we can drop in a jump scare? And at the end of the day, they bought a ticket for the roller coaster. Let's give them some loop-de-loops, so.
One of the saddest.
Yeah, I mean, I think what Mike says is really, I mean, so important, and it's challenging in a script because it doesn't have the range of a horror movie, which is music, cuts, gore, things jumping out of the corner. I mean, so how do you do that on the page? And I mean, I think it's two levels. One is like just kind of looking at other specs and horror novels and kind of see how you can use your words to kind of create that sense of dread, just like in terms of prose as a read. But on another level, I mean, again, going back to the script shadow review, which I thought was really good, when he was analyzing the first act of Barbarian, was really establishing a character that you do care about and putting them in a situation where you know they might die, and then really sort of like stretching that suspense. And I think the first act of Barbarian is brilliant at it. I mean, I think it's the best part of the movie because there are so many moments in there where this dread keeps building and building. And I mean, I think it's a good lesson to take in terms of the writing. I mean, I think it's on one level, obviously prose, you sort of present it on the page writing wise. I mean, and that takes practice and a certain level of, like exposure to reading other scripts and novels, but it's also really just having that character that we care about and putting them in a weird situation where we know something's up and then stretching it.
Well, I'd also love to say, keep motivations simple and clear. I think I've read too many things where they really try to get convoluted and like, okay, house is under attack because they moved the headstones and not the body. Like, keep something that you can grasp. And, the story can go where you want, the characters can do what you want, but make sure we know why this is happening, even if it's the reveal at the end of the movie, but tell me why they're going in the room, when they're hearing, and not running out the door. Like, make sure I know their motivation for what they do. And I'm not just the answer is not just like, so the movie can happen. No, I want to freaking know why we're not running, why we're not moving, why we're fighting, why we're killing, just make it clear. By the end of the film, we should just have everything clear.
I agree. Yeah. I think that's why Barbarian, the second act, is not as effective because some of the characters do things that probably most normal people wouldn't do. But I guess we still go with it because it comes out from a noble place. I love the second act of Barbarian.
I was like so proud of Justin Long. Yeah, it's so funny because he is one of the scream queens for me. And if Justin is in a horror film, like something horrible is always going to happen to this guy. I'm like, he is never going to win. So, to see him, play on the Me Too and the writing was so good when, they had him explaining the story and you can hear how he has forgiven himself and excused himself and still the way he tells it, how guilty he is. Like, I actually was really into the second act of Barbarian.
Sorry, bringing up Barbarian. If no one's seen it yet, it just came to HBO Max this week. Please do check it out, just because it's in the zeitgeist and conversation right now. And I think to Dana's point and to William's point, like that perfectly articulates the timelessness and the timeliness, right? The first act is your timeless, you know, two characters in, you know, in an awkward situation. It's strangers on a train. It's North by Northwest. You know, it's Psycho to a you know, lesser degree. And I think what that movie does so well is it plays off of audience expectation. You get to this house, you see Bill Skarsgård, and everything that is telling you as a genre fan, like, that dude's Pennywise, like, I can't trust him. And the entire time it's playing on that expectation. To Dana's point, the second half, that is your timeliness, right? You have Justin Long, who's kind of this schmuck, you know, who is now forced into this situation and has a very specific, you know, ideology and viewpoint on the world right now that he expresses very brilliantly. And I don't, again, want to spoil where the movie is going for those who haven't seen it yet, but please do check it out. I think, you know, as writers, creators, filmmakers, and just fans of the genre that we all are on this call, we're taking, you know, Saturday of the, you know, one of the high points of horror, you know, year-round calendar of Halloween to talk about all of this, is go out, watch these movies, watch the good, watch the bad, understand the things that are working. How are they working for you? What do you like and what do you take away from, you know, different genre stories as films, as TV shows, as books, as blogs, as comic books? How do they affect you?
I think also one part of horror that keys into the idea of mistakes that can be made, one very important part of crafting story as a whole, but horror in particular, is to maintain a mystery, a question that needs to be answered, that the characters need to answer. What, you know, what pulls us through Barbarian specifically, but also all of the better horror screenplays that I've ever read, is I'm always like, there's a question. I'm like, what is going on? What is happening here? And if we too easily solve that, then there's nothing more to keep us in that story besides like people getting their heads cut off or ghosts yelling boo. You're looking for a maintenance of giving the characters a question to answer. And one misstep in crafting that is to lean too heavily into convolution. I've seen screenplays in which the mystery to be solved is just by dumping massive piles of detail and convolution onto the story and saying, well, you're confused, so the characters are confused, thereby it's a mystery. It's like, no. Very, very simple things are like, what is in that house? How did the door get opened? You know, stuff like that. And to continue kind of threading the one question to the next question to the next question, in such a way that by the end of the movie, we're kind of breathless at the end. You know, someone brought up Sixth Sense, is for a very long time where it's like, what is good? We think it's one thing, it's actually another. But even when we think it's one thing, there are questions to be had in terms of that one thing. So I would say from one scene to the next, we're asking what question, what mystery are the characters trying to be solving? Why do we care? And how is this scary? And everything else is almost icing on the cake.
To Michael's point, Gore Verbinski, the filmmaker who's done everything from The Ring to the first few Pirates movies, his sort of, his rule that he would always go to writers with, or the source material that he was seeking out, was always a mystery with a history, right? So it's a mystery that our characters and the audience are going to solve that has a history to the mythology. And you can apply this, again, to every movie he's done, right? The Ring, it's the mystery of what is this tape? How is it killing people in 5 days? And the history of who Samara is that the Naomi Watts character is going to go on. And to Michael's point, right, the movie really sort of follows that trajectory. Along the way, she's learning things about, you know, what this is. To Dana's point, she is actively investigating this, and it becomes personal when her son watches the tape. You know, so that's really something, again, that can be applied to any genre, but specifically to horror. And I think, you know, the thing that has been drilled into me since my first job as an assistant at Universal is really looking at what The Strangers and Brian Bertino did, right? Brian Bertino is always saying, just make it scary, right?
Yeah,
If
do.
it's scary to you, it will be scary to everybody else.
Yeah, the rest of The Dark and the Wicked is perhaps one of the scarier movies I've seen over the last few years. I mean, for me, it's like Dark and the Wicked, Terrifier, Barbarian is really good. But yeah, it's like, for instance, I was an early proselytizer of Mike Flanagan because I saw Absentia. I'm just like, this guy's really fucking talented. You should be, let's keep an eye on this guy, because Absentia was made for like $2, but it's consistently maintaining a sense of dread, of mystery, and it's using every things that don't cost anything. It's like, you know, a shower curtain moves. Something appears where it shouldn't be. It's all, you know, things that you can do within the camera. And that beats all of the gore that can dump on the characters' heads in the world.
And there's other tricks that writers can do to make a script personal to the audience. If your story has something at stake for the audience. Now, let's say The Omen is an example. If the kid lives, the devil's going to come and kill all of us in Armageddon. So now the audience in the theater is invested in Gregory Peck putting that knife into that little kid's neck. We're rooting to kill a little kid because he's going to save all the world. You know, and that's the difference between a movie like National Treasure, where, oh, it's a fun movie, but I don't really give a shit if Nicolas Cage gets to be a wealthy guy or not. You know, what does it mean to me? You know, when am I watching this movie? So I can drool over the fact that the guy at the end drives away in a Ferrari. Where's my Ferrari for watching this crap?
Yeah, there is something really wonderfully specific about drawing the audience into being on the side of a really terrible sin. You know, The Babadook is another really good example where you're sitting there going, kill that kid, kill that kid. It's like you're asking the audience to be on the side of doing and rooting for something really horrible to happen.
Yeah, we just did this with From the Shadows. I mean, it's like, all right, these we're using ancient alien theory, but the lead character, he's doing bad things in order to prevent the next apocalypse, the next mass extinction of the planet that we're causing ourselves. So he's doing these bad things and we're trying to stop him. And yet we're asking ourselves, should we be stopping him? Isn't he right?
Right, yeah.
It's Thanos. You know, Thanos is trying to wipe out half the universe. But he's right. We are overcrowding the world and using up too much resources. He's right. Maybe his way of doing it is wrong.
Right.
So when you put your audience in a situation, you become more involved in the movie, and that's one way of engaging with an audience.
Awesome. So quickly, because we have so many producers on the panel, let's say some of our attendees have a script that they think, it is, you know, budget friendly enough so I can make this myself, but what do I do now? What advice would you guys give them?
I'd say start with, if you have a script idea that you could do yourself, first thing you look around is, can you shoot it yourself? If you can't, find someone who can. Do you have a camera? Let's say if it's not a found footage movie, it's a regular movie, but you and your friends all have a phone with a camera in it, change it. Make it a found footage movie. You're all out at night and you're all recording it. Every actor is recording it themselves. And it's, you piece it together, you got a found footage movie. It costs you $10 to make the movie, you and your friends. Find a way to do it. Pooch and I mean, we made a deal with Fairleigh Dickinson Film School. You know, we have all the crew, all the cameras, all the rigs, all the locations. you know, the heads of all the departments, everything included, and every kid who's a graduate student works in the film, walks out with a credit, and we make a $1.5 million movie for $350,000, ultra SAG, ultra low budget with big stars. So, I mean, you know, you got to figure out how to do it. You know, beg, borrow, and steal money, you know, from your friends. I mean, you know, when I was in college, everyone was talking about Spike Lee because he had just been there. He built up his credit and then got, you know, an Amex platinum card and put, she's got to have it on a platinum card, and then went into debt and prayed that the movie made money, that his credit wouldn't be ruined for the rest of his life. You know, I mean, anything you could do. Like my girlfriend's in real estate. I'm always telling her, if you got a really cool old house that's going to be renovated, that's for sale, let me know, because I'll turn it into a movie. It's a haunted house, ready to go. No set design needed. You know, that's you. Sometimes, you know, necessity is the mother of invention. You know, John Carpenter said the worst thing that ever happened to him was they gave him a budget. You know, I mean, use what you have. I mean, if you have a house and you have a bunch of kids, write a movie about a bunch of kids having a sleepover and something's in the house. You know, I mean, don't always just say, I'm going to write a script and then make it. See what resources you have and then write your script to fit those resources.
I think to Ian's point, you know, again, there's the Spike Lee direction, right? Like, he wanted to be a filmmaker. He put everything on a credit card and bet on himself. Find fellow collaborators that are in the same space as you. Jeremy Saunier did that. If no one's seen Blue Ruin, please go check it out. It's amazing. He was this established DP. He could have continued to make all the money in the world as a DP, and he had a moment before his wife was going to give birth to their first child. So he took his best friend, Macon Blair, who was in somewhat of a similar situation. Macon had established himself as this, you know, let's just call it a B-list actor who was the best friend, the secondary lead, the comedic relief, but he was never going to be a lead role. And they wrote Blue Ruin, which is this brilliant, you know, noir movie. For people who haven't seen it, I don't want to spoil it, but it was designed to turn Jeremy into a director and Macon Blair into a lead actor. And to Ian's point, they begged, borrowed, and stole everything that they could. They both got credit cards, maxed it out, but, you know, made sure that their budget was in line with what they could actually do and could showcase that Macon can be a lead actor and Jeremy can be something other than a DP.
You know, if you need a star, you know, contact an older star from a horror movie. I mean, you know, there are guys running around like, you know, Ken Forey and these guys. You could call their manager. You can get them in a movie for, you know, $10,000 a day. You know, you can make a movie for 50 grand, and, you know, the market the way it is today, if you get the right sales agent, you can walk away with 150. So you can make a movie. You know, it's not, you know, 50 grand sounds like a lot, but, you know, it's the price of a car.
Yeah, if you have a good script, you'll be amazed at how you should be able to find talent. If you know, timing is everything, of course, you know, if the person just happens to have a hole in their schedule. But I mean, we got Marina Baccarin for our last movie, To Your Last Death, for I can't say how much, but it wasn't a lot of money. And it was because she loved the script and because she loved the part, you know, I mean, and that was, we went in cold. We didn't know anybody. We were just like contacted, cold called her manager, sent the script along, and to our shock, they're like, yeah, Miranda loves it. We're like, are you serious? Are you, you know? So don't be afraid to do that. I mean, like, of course you're going to get shot down if you aim too high, duh, you know, but find people who mean something to people in the horror space or in the sci-fi space. Maybe they haven't done something in a while. Maybe they were an Oscar winner in the 80s or something like that. And, you know, they're underemployed now. Maybe they'll do your movie for, you know, 25 grand for a day. You'd be amazed. You just have to try.
Also write so that whoever your name is, if you're going to have a name in your film and you're looking for someone, write in a way that those scenes can be shot in the fewest amount of days.
Yeah.
If you have a way to shoot a character out in a day and have them appear throughout the movie, that's it. You've got your star. If everyone knows the trick, if he's in one scene, and if you take a whole day to shoot one scene or do something difficult with them that takes a whole day, it becomes very expensive to have them because their price goes up. You know, you can get someone for $10,000 a day, or you're going to spend, you know, they'll say, oh, if I'm in the movie for a week, I'm the lead. See, the trick is a lot of these guys will do the movie and you put them at the end of the credits and say, and, you know, or with special guest star. They don't want their name above the credits because it's not their movie. They want their audience to know that. So if you put them in enough of a movie, they're going to say, oh, I'm the star of this movie. Now I'm not going to do it for 10,000. I want 150,000.
Yeah.
I want 250,000.
I think to both
clever how you write.
I think to both Jim and Ian's point, again, think outside the box, right? Like, don't go to Brad Pitt or, you know, or Leonardo DiCaprio because everything is going to them, but go to actors who either who are amazing, but aren't getting lead roles, right? TV has a ton of inherent value now. You know, people off of Game of Thrones are just as bankable as stars in this space. Same thing with Marvel movies. Think about again, just as you're trying to grow in the industry, right? As you're trying to make a name for yourself, look for those as your collaborators as well. Who are the TV directors who are getting to shoot pilots but haven't been handed a movie yet? Like, how are you going to, as you are helping yourself with the material that you're generating, how are you going to find like-minded collaborators who are just as in need of an opportunity to do a movie as you are?
Yeah, I mean,
I would say that.
Sorry, Mike, just one thing to keep an eye out that I'm always looking for is this filmmaker who's had a couple of bombs, who's now doing TV episodes, who you can say to them, hey, I got a small budget, where his name would still mean something. So you could go to that guy as a director for your film and say, okay, he could still launch a small movie, even though his big budget movies went, you know, and now he's doing TV. You got to also look for actors that are supporting roles on television or in film, and they feel ready to you for a lead role.
Keying off of that, what are the economics of horror? Because if anybody makes a horror movie, they'd like to make their money back, or at least make a large part of their money back. So how does that work?
Well, that's a really good question. I'm still in the process of finding that out. I would say check back with me this time next year, and I will have an accurate answer for that. But in the meanwhile, until Death Metal and From the Shadows actually come out, I don't know. We'll find out.
I'll tell you, in my experience is, if you get a sales agent, even if it's just a horror sales agent, baseline on these movies with like no big star, like if you put, you know, a big name in the star, if you put a big name in, you'll tell you what that name earns, and if you make the movie for what that is, that's your baseline. You know, you can pay your investors back. If you make it under that, you know how much money you can make. So if a guy's worth $1 million at the box office, a distributor might say, I'll give you a negative pickup of $1 million, a minimum guarantee of $800,000 in a worldwide deal. So, you know, if you make the movie for 400,000, you know, and you're going to make 400,000, or if he's worth 800,000, he wants 250,000 as salary because he's worth 800,000, then you got to make the movie for 550,000, somewhere in there, so you can at least make your money back for your investors. And that's your pitch to the investors. Say, hey, I already have with this star a guaranteed pickup or a negative pickup or an MG for this amount. I have a prediction of pre-sales from a sales agent of what we can do with pre-sales with that name. That's one way of assuring your investors that you're going to get money back. So when you go to your dad and, you know, your uncle, you know, say, hey, look, I promised you to get your money back because I have a plan.
Yeah, counterpoint though, I gotta say the MG market is not where it was 5 years ago. I used to do everything with the sales agent, we would get our minimum guarantees, and that would be our pitch. And we would just literally build the budget over international sales. Domestic would be gravy, and we hit it over and over and over again, and it was glorious. But now with people buying global rights and Netflix low-balling independent film, which just breaks my heart in a million ways, like, it's not 100% true anymore that you can build your budgets that way. I miss those days. I hope there's a way to get them back, but you can't even bank on a big star. I mean, to your point, well, yeah, if you can get them there for a day or so and throw some money at them, and scheduling is usually the biggest nightmare with that. And but most of them are horrors and will do anything that if it's short enough and the price is right, and you're just like, okay, do it and leave. But even that doesn't necessarily guarantee you anything anymore.
Yeah, you're right. The one shot you have though with horror, and we talk about this all the time when we're being approached by sales agents, is if you can get your horror movie to a distributor that doesn't only do horror. So, I mean, our film now is with a distributor who's doing a Olga Kurylenko film and a Liam Neeson film. So if we get packaged with movies that aren't horror, with bigger budgets. And therefore, I have an MG that more than covers my budget. And because of where I made it at the school. So you have to get creative in your financing, because Dana's right. The MG market for horror is very difficult. That's why if you can make your movie, for $100 grand, the top out on in general, and I'm being very general here, if you can get worldwide, and even that's difficult because it depends on how much gore, how much sex, how much bad language, because Disney bought up a lot of the Asian streaming markets for Disney Plus, so it's all a mess. But in general, it's somewhere, the sweet spot is somewhere around 250,000 if you get full worldwide. So if you can make your movie for $100 grand, you can make 150 on a movie. That's kind of the generalized and very general sweet spot of how you could figure on a low budget independent.
There is in fact an entire business model that calls for doing. Yeah, there's an entire business model that calls for doing a project for $50,000 or under, and just throwing it on Tubi. And there are a lot of filmmakers who are doing that, and it's not an easy route, I don't think, in terms of, because you just have to, in order to make a living, just have to keep cranking them out. But if at the end of the day you want to be someone who makes horror movies for a living, that's one route to take.
All right, we got to move on to Q&A.
You got to feed people. You got to take care. Like, there's a cruelty to it. I've a pure resentment for, and I live in low budget. I love low budget because it makes you creative, and it makes you like really think about how to do things. But you do have to consider the fact that you will be hiring people, you will be paying people, you need to insure people, you need to feed, I hear how low they're shoving these budgets, and it breaks my heart. So, it's not just what's going on the screen you have to consider. It is a collaboration, it is a crew, and it's people who have families and rent to pay. And so I don't even have a point. I'm just ranting at this point because I care so deeply about my crew's happiness. So hearing these budgets, just like it's a dagger in my heart. You look at Rust, who cut corners in the worst possible ways and got the worst possible result. I mean, it's great to get something made, but there's a bigger picture than, how low can you make it? But I am fortunately, on that depressing note, I have to go, guys. I'm so sorry. It was so wonderful to be a part of y'all. And
Dana, thank you so much. We so appreciate your time.
Oh, thank you. This was so much fun, and happy Halloween, my friends.
Yes, same to you. All right, people, let's move on to Q&A because we want to make sure everyone, the attendees, get time to ask their questions. So if any of the attendees have any questions, feel free to unmute yourself and shoot.
Okay, well, that was quick.
Well, I mean, we can.
Okay, one at a time, one at a time.
I'll go.
You go ahead.
Okay, yeah. As far as writing goes,
Hey,
obviously
I know that guy.
hey Mike, how you doing? buddy?
I've actually made a horror movie with this guy.
We have, yeah, that's fantastic.
Awesome.
No money, but we made the movie. Yeah.
Yes.
So as far as writing goes, you obviously you want to pick out, the structure has to be there, the characters have to be there. You want to write from as much of I think, an autobiographical point as possible to get like your true voice out there. But how much do you write in camera stuff? It's like, I'm not a director, I'm a writer. So how much do you write in close up? How much do you write in pan out? How much, when you're trying to sell a spec script, is it necessary, or do you just focus as much as you can on the scenes and the story, or do you you put that in there?
My recommendation is to read specs, especially in
I mean, I've read a ton,
but like specs that sold
a lot of
money.
A lot of really great horror scripts are written by guys that direct it.
No,
so
but I mean, I'm thinking more in terms of maybe just taking a step back, not like a writer director, but looking at actual specs that were written by writers and that sold, like they never intended. I mean, maybe they wanted to direct it, but that was not the way it evolved. And I think there's different styles of spec writing, and then there's different ways of, directing the reader. So I think once you've once you kind of dive into that, and it doesn't even have to be exclusively to horror. I mean, just any spec that's sold where it's really no attachments. Oh, well, I guess the attachments don't even matter, but that will give you a sense of how it has to look on the page and feel and breathe, and just and then you might have your own way of doing it. I mean, obviously, there's different writers do it differently. I mean, some are more minimalist, some are more descriptive.
Dude, I would not put in any on-page direction. For what, that used to be a common thing, but for the most part, it's old-fashioned and it's clutter. Because your director is probably just going to ignore it anyways. I think that you can, if you want to, like if you're shooting it yourself, then they're basically notes for yourself on the page. But I would pull way back on that. I would stay away from talking about the camera at all, unless it's absolutely necessary to the storytelling. If there's a moment where, for instance, something is happening and then we pull back and reveal that someone has been watching this entire time, then that's a story beat that we're reflecting only with the use of the camera. But outside of that, wide shot, establishing, close up, get rid of all that shit. Don't put it on the page.
Yeah, if you have a killer stalking and you want a POV shot, that's because you're the killer, and you don't want to reveal who the killer is. There's a reason for it. That's one
story. That story, right?
Right. Yeah.
Know your audience, right? Like a lot of genre now is selling with directors. To Ian's point, to Michael's point. If your strategy is going to be approaching filmmakers, having a little bit of direction, right? Because your base audience for your first round is going to be filmmakers, right towards them. Or again, if you're doing a found footage movie where, direction is part of the story, right? It is, if you're writing, a Cloverfield, the first Cloverfield movie, where the camera is and what the camera is showing you is part of the genre, then lean into that. But I don't think there's like a hard and fast rule for all of it. It's really just, what do you, when you finish your script, what are you going to go do with it, right? If you're just going to go try to sell it as a naked spec in the market, to Michael's point, less probably better. If you're going to go approach directors and try to package it up a little bit, maybe a little bit more so that they can sink their teeth into it. I don't think there's a hard and fast rule that can be applied across the spectrum. But just really having a plan.
There are some things, like most of the time, if you hand a script to someone like Cooch or me, I'm sure a lot of you, we'll know where the jump scare is. We'll know what's happening from reading it. And sometimes, you want to immerse the reader in the story as much as possible. So you want to get away from all script notes. But sometimes, like we put in a note in bold, like, all right, so this is in the 1970s style. Let them know, like if I'm doing a scene and it's going to be look like a 1970s horror movie for a reason, like we don't know that we're watching a film yet. It's a film within a film. I'll put in, this looks like an old 1970s slasher, or something like that, to let them know I'm not just making this bad because I write bad. It's supposed to be bad. Also, if it's not clear that there's a jump, I mean, sometimes I know I drive Cooch crazy with it, but sometimes I'll put in bang or boom in exclamation points.
Big jump scare.
Yeah. This is a jump scare, because things get sold on jump scares all the time. I mean, even Mike Flanagan said, for Vampire Academy, I'm tired of people telling me I don't do enough jump scares. So he puts 52 jump scares in the first episode to break the record for jump scares in an episode, so people would just shut up, I mean, everyone's got their own style, but the point is, whatever you do, you want to immerse the reader in the story. So anything that's going to take them out of it or confuse them, or make them think about where a camera is when they should be focused on, is this character going to die or not? I would leave out.
I would add that, and again, I think reading specs will help. Whatever makes it the most gripping on the page, and whatever makes it feel cinematic. Because I mean, as a screenwriter, you're kind of a filmmaker on paper, but that doesn't mean every shot is, because that slows down to read. But at the same time, just the way the description flows, the way the sentences and the way you're using dashes, it's kind of like you're seeing the cuts, you're seeing a movie, So I think, again, diving into specs, good specs, especially in your genre, I mean, is a good way to see what other people have done effectively. And you're going to sort of bring whatever you bring to the table and develop your own style that works. But I mean, there are sequences that are very complex. I mean, maybe there's a scene where there's a lot of cross-cutting involved, and maybe you will use cut twos in it just because it makes them really pop on the page without reducing the readability of the page, right? But at the same time, other times it's like, yeah, you're over-directing the scene on the page, So it's kind of like you got to develop a judgment call and see, because you want it to be exciting. It needs to be exciting if it's action. It can't just be like it's a paragraph and it's boring. Like when there's tension, you got to use all the tricks in your bag, to kind of bring that out.
And it's a good example of what you're saying is a good example, because if you're writing a script and you're cutting between, let's say, things that are happening in two places, you can use a cut to go back and forth to those places, right? But if it's a shooting script, you're going to need to number each one of those scenes, and it's going to be separate because you've got to film them separately, even though in the sequence when you're watching it goes from here to there, from here to there. If you're doing a shooting script, you're going to have to number it differently. So the kind of script you're writing dictates also how you write it. And you might, once you sell the script or option the script, you're going to sit down with a director who's going to tell you, I want it done this way, and then that's when all those camera angles and stuff might come into it. So for the rewrites, it's good to have a working knowledge of how to do that, even though it's old fashioned. But for later, not usually the first pass, because like you said, you want to get them excited about the story and the people into the story.
Awesome, thank you. Attendees, anybody else with a question, feel free to go ahead and unmute yourself and shoot.
Yes, I have a question. I know we've talked about what's hot and subgenres and such. From my perspective, it seems that supernatural paranormal horror has been pretty dominant over the last 15 years. It's certainly like 4 out of every 5 horror movies is supernatural paranormal. And from my humble opinion, I find that there's nothing more uninteresting than angry ghosts, haunted houses, or possession. Does anybody see that fever breaking, where other subgenres become just as popular?
No,
the reason for that is because non-gory horror movies can be rated PG-13, and are thus easier to justify a wider theatrical release, and they also travel better to non-domestic territories. There's a financial reason for that.
Yeah, all of that.
It,
Go ahead.
yeah, I mean, if there is a desire on your part to make a really gory, I mean, not to say that there's no such thing as a really gory R-rated movie that gets a theatrical release or gets made at all, but those situations are far more specific, I should say. And if there's a desire within your heart to make a gory R-rated type movie, then we're looking at smaller budgets and in all likelihood in independent production.
And less
So-
of a foreign sale, less foreign sales. You're not going to get into the Asian markets at all. Asian markets don't want, first off, if you're doing a ghost story and you call a ghost, it won't sell in Asia. You're going to have to do dubbing, or your subtitles are going to have to use curse. Asian markets don't know what a ghost is. So that's one problem. So the curse market is bigger than the ghost market. And then they don't want nudity, they don't want cursing, and they don't want gore. That won't sell, and you will never get into China. And right now there are more avenues for sales in Asia than there are in the US. And Disney now has brought up a lot of the Asian streamers to fill the marketplace for Disney Plus. So a lot of these independent places that you were able to go to, it's smaller now. So most people will tell you, if your movie's gory with nudity and sex and a lot of bad language, you're not going to get much on foreign.
I would say if you have a desire to make a project that can fit the PG-13 model, but is not the standard angry ghost in an old house model, then that's where we get into where we were talking about the subversive territory. What's a version of a story that can be done where we can get teens into the theater on an opening night without a bar of resistance to that, and still scare them, but isn't same old that we've seen a million times.
What I would add to it, Harry, is that, I mean, if never write something that you're not feeling, if those subgenres are not speaking to you and you don't see that new angle, don't worry about, like maybe 80% of the market is that or this, because I don't even know if that's completely 100% true in terms of original ideas. I think you need to tap into what you're excited about and what you think is the most unique idea, and then just commit to it. I mean, and again, it has to be high concept, it has to be commercial, it has to be a precedent in genre. I'm not saying just do something that's completely in a vacuum, but like right now, social horror is very hot. It's not a haunted house, not possession. So there's a lot of options there, and it is within what the market is kind of open to. You look at the Stepfather, franchise. There's different ways of doing horror, so you got to find your way. As opposed, don't do something just because you think it's hot. That I mean, I think we talked about that even earlier.
So I think to William's point, each successive, movement in the, mainstream horror space is informed by the one before it. So yeah, for a while, the supernatural ghost story, for all the reasons that everybody's explained before, was the dominant subgenre. Now, if you look across the board, it's really built from The Conjuring, right? And that moves to Get Out, which brings in the social aspects to it. But, now any horror movie, from monsters to slashers to demons to, what have you, it approximates a version of the real world, right? This isn't 90s New Line and everybody's an underwear model running around in the forests. Like, these people feel like your neighbors. You look at Barbarian and that looks like a neighborhood that you could see in Detroit, even though it's Serbia. So I think that right now is what people are really looking for, that can be applied across the board, right? Do these people seem like they live in the same world that we do? And that can be applied to any subgenre.
I think, the gorier the movie, there's a market for it. there is still a market for it, but it's more in the United States, and movies like Serbian film and that are made more for the United States. So while we have a more open market, and there's some markets in Eastern Europe that will accept it and all that, like when I make a movie, the sales agents tell me, don't ever say it's a horror movie. It's a supernatural thriller.
Or when our sales agent was shopping from the shadows, it's a spooky scary.
Yeah, I said, what the hell is that? It works. They understand that it's not gory. It's not, it's not all, you get it, it scares. It's what they want. They want jump scares. I mean, when I did episode 50, we're at Cannes, and it's being screened for the studios, and it was up against The Devil Inside. And my director fought against me and didn't shoot like 4 jump scares because he thought they were cheap jump scares. So he didn't shoot them, but they were in the script. So the studio watchers sitting there in Cannes with a piece of paper, and when you write those lines, 1, 2, 3, 4, you put a line through it for 5. Every time the audience went, oh, they put a line. And at the end, The Devil Inside got picked up for worldwide theatrical release instead of me because they had 4 more scares than me. And those 4 were in the script and not filmed. So today, it's a measure of the jump scares of the audience, and that goes back to the commercial that they did for Paranormal Activity, where the audience jumps and everyone wants to see it. So from now, they're looking at how many jump scares, because jump scares, not kills, but jump scares, not gore, but jump scares, because that sells. If a cat jumps out and the audience jumps, the movie's doing its job, even if the cat was never seen in the movie and has nothing to do with it. If you're watching this movie for 10 minutes and you don't jump, it's not a good movie. That's how people who don't understand horror, who are judging you, are going to judge your movie. But first, you got to get it made. So
I think it comes back down to like the movie has to be scary, So that is like the most important part. Whatever you do, I mean, you cannot, like, especially with social horror, you can't be so seduced by what you're saying about what's going on or whatever you want to comment on that you forget that it's a horror movie. So scares, jump scares, whatever, the mystery element that I think Mike and David mentioned, like those are like really part of that, the DNA of horror. But I think again, like it's really about, just you have to believe in what you're writing, and and try to know how it fits within the genre, and not forget that it's a horror movie in the end.
Hey Ian, check it out. Check your inbox. We actually just got the key art for From the Shadows.
Oh, we did. We got it.
Yeah. Should we show it?
We have.
Yes.
First of all, do we have any other questions from our attendees?
Yeah.
Attendees, if you have any questions.
Yeah,
feel
I have a
free
question.
Yes.
What is the difference between, like, when is a thriller become an actual horror versus like a thriller drama?
Oh, that's a really good question, because we've had those like really hair-splitting conversations where it's just like, okay, is Seven a horror movie? And if not, why not? Because it's called a thriller, but we have a guy and he's going around and he's murdering people and XYZ. Why is Seven a thriller, but Halloween is a horror movie? And I think it comes down to tone. I think that I remember speaking to one executive who told me that the difference between a thriller and an action movie is how the problem of the story is solved at the end. It's an action movie if the problem is solved with a gun. It's a thriller if the problem is solved with a clever ploy on the protagonist's part. So it's like, aha, I caught you. I've exposed the conspiracy, and now everyone knows that you're a crook. It's so what's the difference?
The action movie is when Schwarzenegger gets pissed off enough that he goes and gets all the guns, puts them in his car, drives through a wall, pulls out the guns and shoots everybody. That's the action movie ending.
So that's my convoluted way of saying, like, I don't know for 100%, but it is like one of those things where you kind of know it when you see it. And I think it really does come down to tone and also the intention of the piece. I think, like I said before, the intention of a horror project is always to scare the audience. And whereas a thriller has a lot of Venn diagram crossover with a horror movie, I think thrillers are inherently an internal genre where you're gripping your seat and you're kind of with that. Whereas horror feels external, like you're jumping along with the crowd. And which isn't to say that you can't have jumps in a thriller, but you know, what is the primary payload? So yeah, and it's funny because even the term supernatural thriller was invented for The Sixth Sense, you know, to separate it from horror, because horror was at that time was like Nightmare on Elm Street Part 6, whereas they want to class up the joint with you know, supernatural thriller. So it's, you know, that's a term to let the audience know that grown-ups can go see, it's a horror movie for grown-ups, if that makes sense. So
yeah,
I think they're closely related. I mean, psychological horror or psychological thriller and horror are really adjacent. So that's why it can become blurry at points. But I think in the end, a psychological thriller is still grounded in reality. Like it never crosses over into supernatural or paranormal, because at that point, then you're going into supernatural thriller, and then the next step is horror. It's also a question of how, like, suspense versus horror shock moments, you know? So you can have like psychological thrillers that are very scary, have lots of elements of horror in it, but it still stays within that Hitchcockian like realm of reality. And going back to Seven almost is kind of a horror movie, but because the killer is still a human being, like it never becomes like he's possessed, paranormal. It's truly like a psychological or crime thriller that really is at the horror adjacent, like almost like a giallo film or something. So I mean,
yeah,
it is like I mean, you have to look at just genre precedent and then write the movie, you know, like kind of know what normally is labeled as psychological. I mean, in the end, it's just a label. And I think the difference is really not so much even tone, because both horror and thriller can be dark and everything. It's really about genre. And then
yeah, you could have two different movies that are basically, our protagonist is in the house by herself and a creepy guy is trying to get at her. And one of them could be very clearly like everyone goes, oh yeah, that's obviously a thriller. And another version could be, oh yeah, that's obviously a horror movie. And it's like, what separates the two? And good question.
No, I think it, but it is a question that can be answered, because I mean, you look at a movie like Hush by Mike Flanagan, right?
Right. Yeah.
Natural.
I was actually just thinking about Hush.
I mean,
horror thriller. Yeah.
It is I mean, if you really boil it down, it probably would be a psychological thriller, but it's really not that psychological. It's very visceral. It's really about being stalked and attacked, and there's a lot of attack moments. So it kind of slips really into the horror genre, because you have the slasher genre, and a lot of slashers are not paranormal or supernatural. But again, that's like having that extensive knowledge of, you know, what's out there, how it's categorized. And then you just have to write the story the way you feel it should be written, you know, like what story you're trying to tell, you know. But I think horror just gets more and more visceral, especially on the attack levels, on the moments of horror. It's played up more, you know.
I mean, you could look at a movie like Pacific Heights. I mean, you could, if you took Pacific Heights, you could, it's a thriller now, but it could easily be a horror, you know, with just a little bit of a shift.
Yeah, once you go more graphic, you know, but that's another thing. If it goes graphic, then you're segueing really into then the label that they're going to put on it is horror, even if it's all, you know, going back to you know, Stepfather, you know. So I think they're very closely related. American Psycho is another one, fully a psychological thriller, but it's also a horror movie. So sometimes it can be both. But I think really, the real key is like coming back to Orphan, you know, Orphan Kills. I mean, that's like psychological thriller because there's nothing supernatural in it, but it's a horror because it just goes one step more graphic maybe. So you would probably market it as horror.
It's interesting you bring up Orphan, because if you watch the disc and you watch the original ending, it's a psychological thriller. The theatrical ending that they tacked on later made it a horror film.
But that's, I think, to William, Michael, and Ian's point, it's tone and intention, obviously, always. but then it's also, you know, to Ian's point on the ending to Orphan, understanding the marketplace at the time, right?
Right.
Horror is something that oscillates between, you know, a subgenre that every studio wants in the moment to something that, you know, at the time that Seven was coming out and they were on, you know, Nightmare on Elm Street 65, you know, was seen more as this sort of, you know, let's just call it B or low grade product. Now, you know, the horror genre is sort of coming back in a more prestige fashion with places like A24. For example, Ari Aster originally wrote Hereditary. It's just a straight up thriller in a genre about this family that had lost a child and how it like destroyed all of them internally. And, you know, at the time, the horror subgenre was what everyone was kind of excited about. It was easier to get, you know, marquee talent like Toni Collette involved. So he, you know, pivoted in that direction. I think it's just being aware of what the market is and what you as the filmmaker, the writer, what your intention is, and if, you know, you're willing to, you know, either sacrifice or move in either direction. There's really a thin line that separates the two. And as everyone's already said, it's really tone and intention, but marketplace and, you know, market realities should play a factor in that as well.
And I'll give you the correct answer. If you're in a pitch meeting and the producer you're sitting in front of asks you, well, is this a supernatural thriller or a horror movie? Your answer should be whatever you want it to be, that'll get it sold.
Attendees, do we have any other attendee questions? Feel free to unmute yourself and shoot.
Well, I have a question if no one else does, because we got to wrap it up. But since we have Jake and David here, I definitely wanted to ask this one specifically, which is if you have a horror spec, is it essential that there be attachments? Can you send something out naked nowadays? Can you send a horror script out naked? And if so, under what circumstances? I'm really interested to find that one out.
I'll jump in. I think right now at this moment, you can just go and like, just everyone's, you know, the horror is just so hot right now at the theaters. Not so much on streaming, but so I think you could just go. But I always take some shots, right, David? I mean, like, why not flip it to a Sandberg? Why not flip it to a Juan or Muschietti? I mean, just, you know, big names hunting and take a couple weeks and take some shots. But ultimately, I don't think it's necessary. I think it's concept driven, and then the script obviously needs to deliver on the execution. But right now, take a couple like A+ shots because you might get a Sandberg type, and then just go, just let it rip.
Be nimble, really just be nimble. What is your idea? And more importantly, what are the movies you like, right? Like go and really just look at them, right? Do you like a horror movie because of the actors involved? Do you like a horror movie because of the writer or the director? And really see what those elements are doing. A lot of, you know, again, a lot of these people, whether they be actors or screenwriters or directors, are trying to or are wearing multiple hats, you know, to Jake's point, right? James Wan is both a producer and a director, right? He's got a very, you know, lucrative production company at Warner Brothers. You know, if you have something that feels like it fits into the DNA of what he is doing, take the shot. Who knows where it's going to go, but don't wait around, you know, longer than, you know, a couple of weeks for James Wan's company. Keep going, don't stop. Just get your script in as many hands as possible, because really you're gonna get, you know, a ton of no's, but all you need is one person to stand up and say yes and have a real plan, you know, whether that be the independent space, the streaming space, the studio space. Just find like-minded partners, you know, who are as passionate about your material as you are, and, you know, make it happen.
Yeah, it seems to me it's like just write the best script, most high concept, cool script, and get a rep, and then the rep can figure out what the strategy is, unless you want to make it yourself. But if you're not going to make it yourself, just try to follow other specs, the marketplace, the greatest idea, and then get that person who can interface you and figure out a strategy.
And, you know, if you're trying to make it yourself and you're trying to get actors, sometimes it pays to get a director first, because the actor will, first question will be, who's the director? Usually. Also getting a director, you know, it seems like you don't have, sometimes when you go in, they say, well, how do we see the movie? Okay, I get the story, I get that. How do you see the movie? Some studios want you to do all the heavy lifting. So if you're not just a writer, but you're a writer producer, you know, and you go in with the director, then the director has a vision already for the film, you know, and he will talk about how he's going to shoot it and how it's going to look and where it's going to be shot, blah, blah, blah. So that it can enhance a pitch sometimes. So who you have, director as opposed to actor, could make a difference.
Awesome, great. All right, Jim, did we cover everything, or can you think of anything we have not covered?
Well, there's a ton of stuff we haven't covered, but we are out of time. So unless any of our other guests have a quick question that we can cover in like 2 minutes. Anybody else? All right. Well, Tanya, let's wrap it up.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone. Thanks to our panel. Thanks to our attendees. We really appreciate your time. And you can always find us at coverageinc.com, and this will be available for download in about a couple of weeks.
Thank you, everybody. Really couldn't have done it without you. Really appreciate all you taking your time out, and happy frickin' Halloween.
Happy Halloween.
Happy Halloween.
Happy Halloween. All right. Bye-bye, everyone. Thank you so much.
Yeah, nice meeting everybody.